Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us for our talk entitled Our Photographs and Your Imagination, Our Cardiff Heritage Trail. My name is Laura Harrison, and I'm the events coordinator for the Jewish History Association of South Wales. We will be recording this talk and uploading it onto our YouTube channel, so if I can ask you all to please mute your microphones and keep your cameras switched off, this will help with the recording quality. This talk is the Jewish History Association of South Wales's contribution to B'nai B'rith UK's European Days of Jewish Culture and Heritage. B'nai B'rith is a cross-community global organisation originally founded in New York in 1843 before spreading to over 59 countries around the world. It advocates for all Jewish people and champions human rights and community service for all, regardless of race or religion. They promote tolerance, combat anti-Semitism, and work to eradicate racial and religious prejudice through interfaith dialogue, and we're very pleased to be a part of their programme of events. B'nai B'rith UK's theme for their 2021 Jewish Heritage Days is dialogue. So it's my pleasure to introduce our speaker today, Mike Hawkins, who will be telling us all about his work producing the Cardiff Trail. Mike has been a volunteer with the Jewish History Association of South Wales since its very beginning. He is originally from Bristol, and in 2008, he took early retirement from the civil service and moved to Cardiff to help his wife run her weight management business, and her office was in the former Cathedral Synagogue. When that business closed, in June 2016, he joined Chronicle, a VCS Cymru project run by Claudia, who is now project manager at the Jewish History Association. Here, they were looking at the history of volunteering in southern Cardiff over the previous 100 years. As part of this project, Mike researched volunteering on Charles Street and in Grangetown, helped design 4 walking trails. He put the trails on the Chronicle website, which sadly no longer exists. He co-wrote radio programmes, designed exhibition panels, and carried out oral history interviews. He carried these skills over with him when he joined the Jewish History Association of South Wales in 2018, and he's been instrumental to many projects, including cataloguing and putting on People's Collection Wales, the C.W. Asher Grunis Archive, the Newport Synagogue Minute Books, and information about Cathedral Road Synagogue. He's carried out around 70 oral history interviews, including all but the first used by David Jacobs in his talk, which some of you may have attended back in July. Mike is also our copyright and data protection specialist, and he helps to complete evaluation reports, which are essential to our grant applications. And last but not least, he has organised the creation of the Cardiff Jewish Heritage Trail, which is what has brought us all here today. If you have any questions for Mike, he's happy to answer them as we go. Please write them down in the Zoom chat function, and we will answer as many as we can as possible during the next hour. So I'm going to pass over to Mike, and thank you very much, Mike.
Okay, thank you very much, Laura. That was a very good introduction. That should be, I suppose, because I wrote it. But what the point I wanted to make really is that all these things like oral histories, creating trails, putting stuff on the website, is all stuff that I've never done before. And the only reason I've been able to do it is because I joined Chronicle, and then I joined the Jewish History Association of South Wales as a volunteer. And that gave me the skills to go and do these things. So if any of you out there would like to do this kind of stuff, you know, all you need to do is join a local history association. And the Jewish History Association of South Wales is a very good and ambitious one, and learn how to do them. Okay. So today I'm going to talk about the trail. I'm going to try and screen share here, which is always a bit tricky for me. Sorry about a little delay there. So you should be looking now at my PowerPoint. Is that right? Can you let me know, Laura?
Yep, we can see your PowerPoint.
Okay, I'll just put it up properly. Right, okay. So the thing I'm talking about today is the Cardiff Jewish Heritage Trail. It has been quite well received. We've had around 3,000 viewings so far since we kind of officially launched it near the beginning of July. Some of the comments that I'll read to you. What a fabulous site, brings back a lot of memories, some happy, some sad. Fascinating and wonderfully well researched, a tour de force well done. Speaking personally, I'm interested in the history of Cardiff Jewry as, though we were not Jewish, my parents had Jewish families as friends as I was growing up. I followed their link and viewed the trail with interest. I found the maps and the links useful and was amused by the account included in the Penellan mikveh, which is the mikveh item. And finally, I've already tried your trials and they're brilliant. For me, it was a combination of revelation and nostalgia. Who knew that the Empire Pool, where I went every week, had a mikveh? I just mentioned those comments just to say it has been quite well received, which we're quite pleased about. So I don't feel I've got imposter syndrome, because although I have no qualifications whatsoever, I still feel that I've got something that I can talk about. I wasn't sure what the audience for today was going to be. I'm guessing there might be 4 types. The local Jewish community could be here. I know that some of them are. The general Jewish community around the country, because this is for B'nai B'rith, who might want to know more about Cardiff. Cardiff people who want to know more about Jewish heritage. And there might be some, I think, probably on catch up, because the local history societies aren't really running yet post-COVID, who want to know more about creating the trail. So I'm going to try to cater for all of them, one way or another. So if I go through a bit you don't like, maybe something you like a bit more will come up fairly soon. The title of the talk was Our Photographs and Your Imagination. And the reason we chose that title was because it seems like since the Second World War, since the 1950s, Cardiff has been trying to obliterate its heritage, and certainly most of the earlier items on the trail no longer exist. So in fact, what we're doing is taking them to places and saying, this is what would have been here, and this is what would have been there. So in a lot of ways, it might be easier to do the trail as a virtual event on your computer, and then pick out things that you think are particularly interested and go and look at them. Okay, so this is what I'm going to try and cover today. First of all, I'm going to say what our original task was. Secondly, I'm going to talk about the Lockley app. That will all become clear, I hope, when I talk about it. How we organised ourselves. I'm going to introduce our website. I'm not going to go through the whole of our website on the trail on this talk, because you can do that yourselves in your own time, and there's no need for me to really do that now. But I will talk about 2 items on the trail where we did some more original research and found out things that hadn't been known before. I'll take questions as we go along if there are any, and also at the end. And I'll put on their quiz. I mainly put that on because I thought if we ran out of time, that would be a good filler, but also because I've got some questions which will go on the website. I'm not going to ask them today. And the point of the questions really was to try to bring out the variety of items that you can find on the trail. Okay. So the task is to create a bilingual digital heritage trail using the Walking Jewish History app, which I'll introduce in a moment. But this particular project was part of a larger project, which also included 3 other aspects. One of them was researching the names on the Cardiff Reformed Synagogue Memorial Tablet. This is the one in Moira Terrace, which is a record of names of people who died in the Holocaust, but for which there are no known burial sites. That's quite an interesting project that we did, and we seem to have brought a lot of the facts about these people and their biography to life, and the website on that will be appearing soon, and there are a few examples of the names that we've researched on our own website at the moment. We've also been researching Jewish history with the Ronda, Kun and Taff museums and helping them identify and explain their Jewish items and bring to life some of their Jewish heritage. And we are creating a toolkit to help other people preserve their heritage. There's a little bit more about these in the newsletter, which you will have received if you're on our mailing list. And if you're not on our mailing list, you can put your name down on our website. I have to say, the project was led by Claudia Urzen and funded by the National Lottery Heritage Fund, the Jewish Historical Society of England, Cardiff University, and the Jewish Memorial Council. So this is the Lockley app called Walking Jewish History. And this is the app that we were going to put the trail on. Those of you who are familiar with the trail will not recognize this for reasons that I will explain. So this is what it looks like on the Android, I think, or Google Play site where you can go and download apps. So it's called Walking Jewish History, and at the moment it contains the hidden history of Jews in Bangor, as you can say, and you can follow the trail there and learn about Jewish families who lived in the city. So you go to your favorite app site and you can download that for free. Walking Jewish History. Now, I can't show the app on my computer because I'm doing this on a PC at the moment. I'm sure I could work around it, but it wouldn't load on that. So what I've done here is I've just done a demo of the app as a sort of screen video on my iPhone, and then I'm now showing that to you on my PC. So this is a bit creepy because what will happen is you'll see the app move as I do things to my iPhone, but you won't see me doing the motions. So this is a Jewish History Bangor interactive trail. This is a welcome screen. Welcome to this tour of Jewish Bangor. You will uncover the hidden history of Jews in the city. And then when you go in, you find out how to follow the trail, and you can go down the bottom, tells you there are many points of interest, and you can begin the trail. There's also a trail introduction, which is above that. And as you look at the trail, you get a list of items which are one above the other, and you can scroll down through them, all of them. I'll pick one out in a moment, and I'll just show you what that particular one looks like when you go into it. So this one, I believe, is Wutsky Square, and then you get a picture at the top, you get the details of who it is, and then down through the app, you then get some history. And if you want to read this, then I suggest you download the app and you can read it in your own time. And this gives you various images and descriptions about Wutsky Square. And there's a little bit there before and after. And I'll show you the before and after, but it's confusing because it comes out in landscape rather than portrait. So you'll find you're looking at it sideways on. But you'll get the gist of this because you just move the bar down or across and back up again, and it shows you what that particular place looked like before and what it looks like now. So that's the idea of before and after. And there are 5 of those before and afters on our own website, which will produce for us. And then there's a map. So that's basically, and there's a map at the end which shows you these different sites. So that's the Jewish Walking History app. And our aim was to produce a similar thing for Cardiff that would go on there. So a little bit of chronology. That app was developed by Professor Nathan Abrams of Bangor University, I believe. I met him on the 8th of November 2019, almost 2 years ago. He was doing an exhibition of the Bangor information he had in the Pierhead in Cardiff. So I went down and we had a chat, and he agreed to introduce us. He'd already spoken to Claudia, by the way, so it had been agreed in advance. And he said he'd arranged an introduction with his app developer. And then we heard in the 18th of December that the app developer was working on a Cardiff version, as it were, ready for us to introduce. And we were given access to that on the 14th of February 2020. So essentially what we had was an editor where we could put our own information in, a Cardiff version, which would stand alongside the one there for Bangor. And they were going to also add one for Llandudno as well. So the content we were looking at, I'm not going to go into detail on the content now, but basically the things we thought about were synagogues. I think we've got 8 covered on the trail. The 3 cemeteries. Arts, I thought were very important, so we covered chapter, Sherman Theatre, the Royal Welsh College of Music and Drama, and also there's a mention there of the thing in the bay, which is mentioned within the chapter item. Businesses, generally the ones we picked were the ones we had information on, so if we'd spoken to someone from my business or they'd contacted us and we had information and we put them on. There were a few others that we included as well, things like the mikveh, the social club, Masons. There were various topics that we included like that. We wanted an example of a school, so I put Wood Street School on there, which is because there's no Jewish schools in Cardiff. As an example, because there's some good KJX articles in that, particularly about KJX Limited. I'm introduced some people as well. So we've got Colonel Goldsmith, who was very influential at Cathedral Road. We've got the Absi brothers, Bernice and Harold Rubens, the Shermans, Michael Moritz, and a couple of reverends, although we could have included more. We've got Reverend Jerevich, Reverend Graf, and Rabbi Asher Grunis on there as well. So, in terms of organisation, the tasks we had to do were quite straightforward, really. First off, we did research and we wrote 2 versions of each item. The 2 versions were because we wrote one with kind of notes on it so that we knew where the information that was used came from. And then when we put it on the trail, because we didn't want to litter everything with footnotes and things, we couldn't do footnotes originally anyway. When we did the trail, we used this kind of more free-flowing version of that, and then kept the original in case we needed to refer to it. But we also included the sources that we used in the original item. You had to decide the location, and the location sometimes was a bit difficult because various things like the mikveh had several different sites. Bogard, a firm Bogard, had been at least 3 different sites. The social club had moved a couple of times. Pennyland House has been at several places. The Samuel Fountains have been all over Cardiff, really. Bakeries again. Rabbi Asher Grunis had 2 different addresses that we know of, and pawnbrokers were just everywhere. So we used a little bit of discretion in terms of which location we would use for each item. We did decide, because of the format of the trail, that we would pick 1 location per item, but mention the other ones within that particular item. So you might find that you're looking at something and you read about an area that you already maybe passed before we'll be going to later on. I'm afraid that's just the way that it works in a way. A condition of doing the items is that we would have between initially 1 and 4 images of them. Later, we did use a lot more than some of the later ones that we wrote. Some items we didn't include because we couldn't find an image that would have been suitable, or there wasn't enough sort of local Jewish content, as it were, to make it interesting enough to put on there. So we had to find images. Some were quite hard to find images for. I couldn't find. I could find plenty of images of Bernice Rubens, but I couldn't find one that would give me anyone would give me permission to use them. Usually I got no reply when I asked people. Michael Moritz was quite difficult. With Bernice Rubens, we ended up using the cover of a book which we swept off Amazon because we thought they wouldn't complain about that. Michael Moritz, we also didn't get replies on, or they got forwarded to someone else. But in the end, we got one through David Lerman, who used someone, I think, in the press office, local press, who got us permission to use an image from Michael Moritz. Some were kind of lucky because we stumbled over the chapter in the Seligmans. Unfortunately, I heard David Seligman died, I think, last week or just recently. There was an available image of his wedding at Windsor Place on one of his son's websites, so we were able to use that. So sometimes we were lucky with the images. Some where there wasn't much, like Bute Street, very early days, we used a map. We either used the 1851 Cardiff map, I think it's 1851, or we used the Edinburgh Museum, got a very good collection of Scottish Museum, got a very good collection of maps which you can use. We had to clear copyright on the images that we used. Devise a caption for the images to make sure they're properly credited. Translate everything into Welsh, which is a bit of a challenge because initially we didn't have any Welsh speakers. Fortunately, we came across Highfield, who could speak Welsh, who's been a godsend because she's able to help us get everything on the website. And we had to proofread Welsh, so we used a professional proofreader for much of it before Highfield came along. And we had to input everything, then put it all onto the app. So we put it all onto the app initially. Then once we put everything in English on the app, we had a bit of a problem, which I'll come to in a minute. There were certain themes that we used throughout the trail, which are spread between individual items, but are there as a kind of undercurrent. One of them was the rise and decline of the community. I'll talk about communities because I never felt there was enough unity within the Cardiff Jewish communities to talk about just one community. We tried to bring out where people had come from and occasionally where they'd gone out of Cardiff, to bring the idea of people coming. I mean, the story of South Wales seems to be that Jewish community came to Swansea area, and then later they moved to areas like Cardiff and Merthyr, and then as the valleys declined, lots of people came from the valleys into Cardiff. So Cardiff thought they were doing quite well because their numbers were staying quite high, but what was happening was that they were being supported by the immigration from the valleys, and then as the valley immigration stopped, the numbers in Cardiff started to decline, and I believe still declining now. I wanted to bring out the Jewish contribution to the arts, particularly, and the economy, and make people aware of how the Jewish community has contributed to the culture and the heritage of Cardiff. And kind of as a byproduct, there's a diversity there. There are a few examples within the trail where we've discussed where people didn't get on and didn't necessarily agree, and that seemed to be a feature of Cardiff more than some other communities, although I've been reading recently about London, and there was a lot of argument in the early days of the London Jewish community as well. So I want to talk about the sources that we used. I think the main one that we used was KJX. We were lucky in that we were given an almost complete set of KJX. I'll explain what KJX is in a moment. The local Jewish magazine, and it provided by Lawrence Kahn. I think that all by 3 issues were there. And luckily I'd taken them home just before the lockdown of COVID. So I scanned around 140 articles and 66 advertisements and put them on our own kind of internet so that we could share them. And this did include a 20-part odd history of the Cardiff Jewish community by Morris Dennis. And that's KJX. So it's a magazine of the Association of Jewish Ex-Servicemen and Women. And that's the first issue, #1, which I believe was in 1950. And it was published until, stuttered a bit in the 1990s, but the final one was in 1994. So it covered quite a long period. Although it's an Association of Jewish Ex-Servicemen and Women publication, it really was a community magazine, and there's lots of general information about Cardiff communities in there, and also the valleys as well. Second source we used was oral histories. Well, as I said at the introduction, I was recording, I think, around 70 oral histories, and we had some other ones. And also there were the Hineni ones that were done earlier for the Reform community. So we use them really as background, although we do use some quotes from the oral histories on the trail. We use photographs and scans. Stanley's software, our chairman kindly lent us several folders of material, and one of them also I had at the beginning of lockdown, so I was able to use that. We've been sent a lot of material, photographs by various people that we can use. There are some emails that we received, and I also emailed some people Skrek is one I remember, where I emailed a member of the family to get more information. We had been photographing items in the Glamorgan archives, and although we hadn't finished doing that, we still had a fair number that we could use. And there also, we used existing histories. These are some of the existing histories of Cardiff. There isn't really a standard Cardiff, I think, Jewish history. Jeffrey Alderman's article Into the Vortex is available on Jewish Gen if you want to read that one. It's not very long, and it's about general South Wales. I'm not sure when it was written. The website suggests 1975, but the latest reference there is to an unpublished 1977 paper. Morris Dennis, I'll talk about in a moment. He wrote a bit part, if you like, in KJX, so in various editions, as usually between 4 and 6 pages, he would write a little bit of history about the Cardiff Jewish community. And they ran from 1951 to 1980. Alan Liss has got an unpublished short history of Reform Judaism in South Wales. There's a copy in Glamorgan Archives. We also were given access to his copy. Ursula Henriques and Kai Parry Jones have also done books. I'll come on to them in a moment. This is an example of Morris Dennis. This is the very beginning of his Cardiff Jewish community. Carries on for another 2 or 4 pages, and you can get the gist and carries on from year to year. Although, having said that, I'm just going to consult my notes here. When he gets rather later on into the 1920s, he jumps directly from the 1920s to the 1940s, and he asks in the 1940s article, why didn't he do the 1930s when so much that was eventful took place in the intervening 10 years? And he said 2 reasons stand out. One, that for the 10 years in question were without doubt the worst years of Cardiff Jewry, as far as its reputation was concerned. And 2, that the full story behind much of the, call it machlochos, phrase I don't know, M-A-C-H-L-O-K-U-S, I presume disputes, cannot yet be told in view of the law of libel and the conflicting evidence. So I would love to know some more about what happened in the 1930s. I know a little bit from Rasha in this archive, but not enough to justify that comment that he made there. Anyway, that's Morris Dennis. These 2 books you may well know. The one on the left actually is a book of the month, I believe, in our newsletter, Ursula Henriques. Is it Henriques or I think it's Henriques. It's an interesting book. It's got a lot of different articles in there by different people. The introduction by Paul O'Leary in the 2nd edition, which is that one there, is quite good. It's good. What I would say is treat with caution. You might see examples of that later. And then we have Kai Parry Jones, which is much more up to date. And that's the Jews of Wales, a history. And there was a final one that we used, which you may not be able to see this very well on your screen at the moment, but this is the one, the Melcher, Zach and Cohen family history by Adrian Victor Cohen. And Adrian Victor Cohen was a Cardiff born, but he went to Trinity College, and he worked for the Atomic Energy Authority, the Ministry of Defence, the Cabinet Office, and the Health and Safety Executive. And he did this family history, which I think is a labour of love on his part. It is a family history, so it only covers Cardiff as it impinges on his family. But there were some items that we did, particularly the Great Circumcision debate, which were relied entirely on his account, and then we were then able to go back to the original letters. He unfortunately died recently as well. So I was told about this, so I did attend his funeral, as it were, online. And I was absolutely flabbergasted when his daughter mentioned our trail and said that her dad would have been delighted with it. So, anyway, that's Arthur Victor Cohen. We'll talk a little bit more about him later. So that's some of the sources that we used. However, as I said, we loaded everything onto the Lockley app, onto their editor, and we were all ready to go live, put the Welsh version on, we asked some questions. And then in September 2020, we couldn't get any response from them. We didn't know what happened to them. So we realized that in fact they'd gone out of business. So we had to do an alternative. So we looked at various things. One of them would be to find another app developer. We couldn't find one that we liked or that would do what we wanted in time. And then we looked at doing things on our own website. And the advantages of doing things on your own website is that you can make amendments or additions on an app. Once it goes on the app, you have to go back to the web developer to change anything, which is a bit of a bind and obviously can cost you money. So with a website, you've got your own control. The app, the Lockley app, as you saw before, presents things in the order in which they are nearest to you. So in Cardiff, you could end up walking ever increasing circles looking at them. I wanted to present things in more of a chronological order. We couldn't put proper captions on. The formatting of the text was really limited. There was nowhere to put sources. We were going to put them on the website and actually cross-ref. And alt text, just mentioning that, that's for people who are visually impaired, and it tells them what the image would be so that their system doesn't get stuck when it sees an image and doesn't know what it is. So there's some advantages of using a website. Okay, are we, has anyone got any questions there for us, Laura? Do you know, are we okay as we are at the moment?
Oh, we haven't had any direct questions yet, but we just had a comment from Laura Cohen.
Yeah.
Saying thank you for your kind words. I know Dad, Adrian Cohen, would have been thrilled to know this trail is up and running, and reference some of his family history material. It was, as you say, a labour of love written as a retirement project. Yeah,
that's nice for that, because that, all the things that I read around the trail, that was the one that I enjoyed the most. So yeah, I was thinking of dedicating the trail to him actually, but not quite how you do that. Anyway, this is the trail. I'm just going to introduce you to this quickly because we're pressing on time. So hopefully this will work. So if you go on there, you'll see that there's this part which is on our own website. And this is, there's a little introduction at the top. There's a part there for you to leave any comments. And that is where I got the comments from that I quoted at the beginning of the talk. And then there's a list of people that were involved in the trail. None of them, we weren't all working at the same time. I mean, there's never more than a few people really working on it at any given time. But there were a lot of people involved at various times. So from this screen, you can go into the English trail, and the way it works is we split the whole thing into 3 to make it more manageable. So there's a central Cardiff part, a westward part, and a northward part. And you can just go to begin trail there, and that'll take you through them in order, and then you go back to the westward and northward. Or you can go to individual locations, and there's a map that shows you the locations. And as we're on the central trail now, there's a list of all the items that are on the central trail, and you can click on those and you can go and view it through them as well. So I'm going to take a particular example, and the one I've chosen is Cathedral Road. I could go westward, and this is when the community moved out from Beach Street in central Cardiff and moved west into Campton and Riverside and Grangetown. Or the focus of the community was there. Begin trail. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to, there's a map for this particular part of this trail. You can resize it. I'm going to go to the part where it actually lists them and pick on Cathedral Road. And if you click on Cathedral Road, it will take you to that item. So this is Cathedral Road Synagogue. And here we have the beginnings of it being thought about in 1894, and some photographs as you go through. Again, you can look at this in your own time. There's a timeline on the left, which was introduced by one of our web developers. Stephen put that in. We didn't have anything written for that at the time, so some of them don't have any titles on. Some of them we added titles later. And then there's some links at the bottom. So if you want to look at the People's Collection Wars website, you can see there's photographs there which we put on of the synagogue. And if you go into each of these, you'll see that they each contain a series of photographs. So there's quite a lot of photographs. Most of these are from Alan Schwartz, I believe. Some of them are from newspaper articles of the early ones. Some of them are ones that we took, Claudia took more recently. So there's also a talk here, so you can hear Stanley Soffer talk about this, and you just click on that thing there and he will talk. But I'm not going to play that now because the sound is very bad on my computer. Or you can hear Rob Cantor talk about youth clubs. And then we have a before and after there. You can make that larger if you want to view it. The slider operates, but you can stop it if you like, so that you can see what things look like before and what they look like now. So that's the before and after. Okay. There we are. So that's basically an item there. I'll just show a final bit on this, which is the sources, which is easy to miss. And this is a list of what we used when we made this item. There's not many for here because a lot of the information comes from our People's Collection Wells item that I just showed you, and that lists the sources there that we use. So that's how the website works. So what I wanted to do was go back and talk about quickly, I think, a couple of the things that we researched. One of them was Highfield Road Cemetery. Those of you who know Highfield Road will know that there's a plaque outside which says the ground was given for a Jewish cemetery by the most noble John Marquis of Bute in AD 1841. Marx, President, Solomon Marx, Treasurer, and Samuel Marx, Secretary, 1841. And this was thought to be the oldest gravestone in the cemetery, which I think was attributed to 1845. However, when you look at it, you can see it's very difficult to read the actual date on there. And I think this year reads 1893. And in fact, we did a check of the person, and there was someone of that name who died in Cardiff in 1893. So we also found a newspaper article. The Marquis of Bute, with his characteristic liberality, has, we learn, granted a site for a burial place to the members of the Jewish persuasion residing in Cardiff. The nearest burial place to Cardiff for deceased Israelites is Bristol, a circumstance that cannot fail to enhance the considerable gift of the noble donor. The Glamorgan, Monmouth and Brecon Gazette and Merthyr Guardian, by the way, is the Marquis of Bute's newspaper. Anyway. This was 1843. And then Arthur Victor Gowen brought my attention to an item in a book by William Rees, which was written 1960s, I believe, where he says negotiations were proceeding in 1846 with Lord Bute for a Jewish burial ground allocated as a strip of land alongside the Cardiff Merthyr Road near the Blackweir, which is quite a bit nearer town than the current site. So this was all very confusing. Now, William Rees didn't give any reference for that, but we do know that he was Professor Emeritus in the University of Wales and that he had access to the city archivist. So we assume that there's something in the city archive which led him to write that. Then we have something a little bit later. This one, I believe, is dated 1851. Correspondent equates a certain consequence of the increasing number of Jewish families. The synagogue is intended to be built in the town. The burial ground, which is about being enclosed with a wall, was a gift of the late Marquis of Bute. And finally, we have a letter. And you probably won't be able to read that letter. sure, better read your letter. This is 1850, and this is from Solomon Marx, who's mentioned on the plaque. And he said, I have taken the liberty of addressing you respecting a piece of ground which the late Lord Bute generously and benevolently gave to us for the purpose of burial. We accordingly took possession of it about 4 years since, it's 1846, but it is perfectly useless until we shall have sent the deeds legally entitling us to it up to our high priest. We have 2 or 3 members of our congregation whom their very great age and sickness render liable to a call from their maker at any minute. We are therefore not certain today that the boon granted by his late lordship, Marquis of Bute died in 1848, may not tomorrow be invaluable, and the more especially as that if we were constrained to apply to another congregation, the report that has been spread abroad of our having such a piece of ground would induce them to add to the great expense to which a stranger is always liable for such a privilege. So it looks like the ground was not actually there by 1850. And then we have a record here in 1852, July the 8th, Abraham Lyons of Bute Street, Cardiff, aged 40, being the first to be interred according to Jewish rites in the new burial ground presented to the Cardiff congregation by the late noble Marquis of Bute. So it looks like the first burial was actually 1852. So, and then just to confuse things a bit more, the wall, on the back of the wall where the plaque is, there's this plaque which says this wall was donated by Mr. and Mrs. M.A. Laporte, who were on Bridge Street in Cardiff, in memory of their son, Ivor Wilfred Laporte, in 1951. So it looks like, although we have a plaque which clearly says that the whole thing started in 1841, and although we had a gravestone that was thought to be 1845, you cannot necessarily believe even things that are set in stone. The other thing I want to mention, we have a little bit of time, is the origins of the early Jewish community. So this is our article. Now we have 2 books here, which I have put on one side here. One of them is Ursula Henriques, as I mentioned earlier. And she gives an account of the early history of Cardiff. The first arrivals in Cardiff were Michael and Levi Marx. They had been born in Neath, where it seems a few Jewish families had settled as an offshoot Swansea, the oldest Jewish community in South Wales. Why they decided to come is unknown, but Levi set up as a slop seller, that's a vendor of cheap, ready-made working clothes, and Michael as a watchmaker, both typical immigrant trades. By 1829, Mark and Solomon Marx, sons of Michael, were recorded as watchmaker and jewellers in Angel Street. So this is information based on directories. But there's a problem with that, which I'll come on to in a moment. And then we also have an account from Kai Parry Jones, the Jews as well as a history. By the way, if you're looking at either of these, both of these, there's a copy of Ursula's earlier paper online, which you can access. And there's also a copy of Kai Parry Jones, you probably won't thank me for this, but there's a copy of his dissertation online, which you can access. And in some ways, his dissertation is more detailed, though less up to date, and better reference in his book. But anyway, his dissertation says that the first mention of Jewish settlers in Cardiff, you can find our father and son Levi and Michael Marx. You got the father and son this time, I got that right, who arrived around 1813 in what was then a small market town. And then Michael's younger siblings, Rosetta, Mark and Solomon, who were all born in Neath. So that was what was known when we started, now, but not very little was known. So we had done some other genealogy researches to check, for example, where the Sherman family were born and things like that. So I thought we'd find out if we could find out more about the Marx family. So this is a directory that was relied upon. This is 1813, and this lists Levi Marx as a slop seller and Michael Marx as a watchmaker. It doesn't tell you what the relationship is between them. In fact, Michael, we believe, was Levi's son. Kai had access to this letter, which is from 1858 in the Jewish Chronicle, I believe, Yes, the editor of Jewish Chronicle, and he gives a little bit of information here, talking about activity in the armed services. And he says, my father was an enrolled volunteer at Neath. His father actually was Levi, although he doesn't say so here. My late brother, Mr. Michael Marx, was also for many years in the Cardiff Corps and was on duty at the Merthyr Riots in 1816. My brother, Mr. Solomon Marx, and myself were for several years in the Eastern Glamorgan Corps. And I was on duty at Merthyr, so we've got some bit more information there. So I thought we'd have a little look and see what else we could find. And one of the things I found out was that there was a robbery in 1826. And this is all on the Trail website, whereas a shop of Levi and Solomon Marx, the Cardiff Arms Inn in the town of Cardiff in the county of Glamorgan, was broken open last night or early in the morning, and the following valuable articles stolen therefrom. 1826. Now this was shortly after another brother, Michael, had gone back to Swansea. He married a girl in Swansea and then gone to, not back to Swansea, but gone to Swansea. And this looks, I don't know, looked at this and I thought it looks a little bit suspicious maybe that all this, this robbery and these things disappeared. But they then went bankrupt and they were sold by auction in January 1827, where they sold all their stuff and also household furniture in the stock in trade of the said Levi Marx, who was quite elderly by this time, and in fact he died shortly afterwards. But then I came across this item in the Cambrian, which was a little bit later, and this is where Champion and Hawkins were being executed. It's a bit of a gruesome article, but it does include, on their way there, Hawkins confessed that he did, in company with Champion, break open the shop of Mr. Solomon Marx of Cardiff, distill therefrom jewellery, etc., to a considerable amount, the whole of which was sold to a man in the name of Daly at Bristol for, I take it, £48. He then said that considering the situation he was the cause of placing Mr. Marx and his father in, not only depriving them of their liberty, but also of their character, he begged that his confession might be made public and requested that the governor of Cardiff Jail would call on Mr. Stephen, the police officer, for the sum of £8, which was all that was left of the property. And they checked the story out with the other guy, and it was found to be true. So there was, in fact, a genuine robbery. Other things that we discovered about the family, there was another Samuel Marx, who was a watchmaker in Cowbridge, and he married, I think, the daughter of a Christian minister, and it looks like he was actually the brother of the family. So even in that early time, you had people who were leaving the family, leaving the faith to become Christian. And in fact, I did find a record saying that he had been baptized shortly before his 1819, I believe, he was baptized. Michael Marx, the brother, went back to Swansea when he married, and he was involved in an accident on a horse-drawn bus when he panicked when he thought it was going to crash, and he jumped off and he damaged his leg and had to be amputated, and he died a week later. So just finish off where we are with that item. The point I want to make is about the early community is that you can find out a lot more about the early community. The Cardiff, I think, is unique in a lot of ways. It's not saying unique, but unusual. And it was a substantial community, but it actually grew up during the time when there was censuses and during the time when there was records of gross marriages and deaths, and when there was newspaper reports, which wouldn't have been true so much of Swansea, which developed in the 40s, from the 1740s, or Gloucester, or Bristol, London. So we have a time when we can actually see the formation of a community, and also how precarious it was that there's a family there, that one of them went off to get married, and went to Swansea. They lost their livelihoods because of a break-in. Another one of them went bankrupt. He was an auctioneer, but he survived that. Daughter married a man who fortunately moved in from London, who may have been a relative. So there's a whole lot of history there which we can uncover if we dig a little bit deeper. It just shows you how precarious the whole situation was, and trying to set up a new community in a new town was quite difficult, and there was quite an element of chance involved with it. Okay, so we're getting near the time when we're finished. So I just want to say what's next. Well, we are planning to do a walking trail on Swansea, Merthyr and Newport, which we hope to start possibly in the new year. We're waiting to hear about funding for that. So if anybody'd like to be involved with that, we'd like to hear from you. And the final thing is, do we have any questions?
We haven't had anything so far. I think you've explained everything so well.
Okay.
I just want to say it's an incredible amount of research that you've pulled together for this trail. I mean, the fact that you said that there's no sort of key text that discusses this in any depth, and you've had to kind of take from all sorts of different resources and references. So how long did the project take from beginning to end, and how many volunteers did you have working on it?
Well, I suppose writing the articles took about a year altogether. I think we had 6 people who were writing articles, but only 2 or 3 at a time. So people would come in, some maybe only wrote 1 or 2, some wrote a lot more. Everything went through at least 2 people's hands. So often you get one bit. I mean, I think there was one bit where someone who was working on the early history, he knew somebody who was a Mason. So they get a lot of history about Carmel Masons from them. And then I discovered then that one of the early Marx people had also been a Mason, but he was a Mason in Neath because there was no Jewish Mason in Cardiff at that time. So we were able to tie the thing together. So we tried on most of the articles to try and tie 1 or 2 things together, introduce some sort of general themes through the example of that particular article, and not just make it solely about that particular theme. So yeah, a year or so, and then we had a lot of issues with the website. The website was scary because when it was writing things and copywriting that, I mean, that's all stuff that I can do. So, you know, if someone's doing it, I know what they're doing, how they're doing it, and I can take over, you know, they can't finish it. But the website, once we got onto doing our own website, I can do sort of HTML, and I can do some basics to Bonwix and stuff like that. But when we got into doing the website on PHP, I just do not understand how the website works. So we're totally dependent on other people, and that's a little bit frightening. So we've had about 7 people who looked at the website. I think the first one who looked at it didn't pursue it. We had one who looked very good, but they suddenly got more work, so we couldn't do anything. We had 3 who did the bulk of it. Neeraj and Stephen did an awful lot and made it all kind of come real. Stephen Baldwin, couldn't have done it without him.
It's very user-friendly. I was having a look at it earlier, and it's really nice to use, and how everything links together, and the timeline as well. It's really nice. But I just had a question from John. Said you must have had a lot of material you didn't have space for. So how did you decide what to include and what to leave out?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, the first one is which items to include. Well, if we didn't have a photograph, then we'd have to have a really good reason to put something in. I mean, the Esther abduction, I wanted to include that, so I thought that was quite interesting, and it pointed out the fear of the Jewish community that they would be kind of people come in and convert their children and take them away from the Jewish faith. So we just used a photograph of one of the places where they lived, which are still existing. Generally, it's did we have a photograph and did we have a story which said something about the wider Jewish situation in Cardiff. So there were certain things that we didn't include and something we didn't know about. I mean, I've seen a reference a couple of times to a synagogue in Marlborough Street in the 1930s, but I'm not seeing anything more about that. We were very reliant because it was locked down on what was available in Cambridge. It would have been good to have BIMA, which is like the current community magazine. We did get copies of some articles they did on the mikveh and Penellan House, in particular, which were invaluable. But we didn't have access to the whole BIMA because that would come into Glamorgan Archives, and we couldn't get to Glamorgan Archives. So,
but like you say, there's the option in the future of making amendments if anything does come to light that's significant, can be added in the future. There
is an option. I don't want
independent, obviously.
I wonder whether I should put a note in saying David Seligman has passed away, joined Philippa. And of course, if we made errors, then we'll correct them. But I don't think we've got too many obvious errors on there. But there was one that I made, a real blunder, which was Goldschmidt, who was the driving force behind Cathedral Road Synagogue in the late 1890s. Colonel Goldschmidt, he was the highest ranking Jewish officer in the army at the time. And his parents were Jewish, but they became baptized Christian. I kind of sloppily wrote they were baptized Jewish, but they were baptized and they were Jewish, but of course you can't be baptized Jewish. So I'm not sure that anyone who wrote the articles was actually Jewish on this. To my knowledge, no one was Jewish that we could have this trail. But what we did do was then present to the board who are Jewish. We asked them to look at it, and hopefully they managed to weed out a few of the things that we did. We're not right. There was a lot of discussion about how to spell things.
There's always several ways.
It was at the time, you know, if I've got an article at the time, or how they spelt it themselves, rather than how they spell it now. Is it Edwards Place and things like that? But generally, you know.
Well, I've just noticed that we've reached 3 o'clock, so I don't think there have been any more questions. We've just lots of people thanking you for an interesting talk and presentation, and I completely agree. I've learned so much, and it's been fascinating hearing about all the different places that you got your research from and all the different people who've been involved. So thank you, Mike.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Laura. Thank you.
And thank you everyone for coming, and we'll see you hopefully at the next talk.